Well, thank you, Paige, and hello, everyone. I feel like I'm enjoying having you visit me in my quiet office here on a Veterans Day afternoon. So thank you for taking the time. We had more industry professionals in the first session of this webinar, but it would be great to talk about these same things with board members, managers, to share with you some of these insights about how things go on, what goes on in a reserve study, and what the value is that we can all appreciate. And so that'll be great information. As we go through today's webinar, as Paige indicated, you've been muted for for my peace of mind as we go through the content today, just because of all the people involved. We've got this hands raised icon, and that's for you to be able to respond to me if I ever have a question and want to get some of your feedback. So let's give that a try. Why don't you click the hands raised icon in your control panel that looks like the one you see on screen, and we'll practice doing something interactive right here at the start. So click me a hands raised. Oh, wow. Paige, we have a sharp group. I'm seeing hands go up all up and down my list of attendees. That's excellent. Okay, I'm going to click those hands down. That shows me you're ready, and we're ready here. Okay, the work we do here at Association Reserves, preparing reserve studies, we do that for the design and for the purpose of improving the future of our clients. It's the influence we have on the board members and the managers that we work with. It's our sphere of influence. I feel like we put the reserve study out there and we are trying to influence the board for the benefit of the association. And the idea with this webinar is to enlist industry professionals and all of them with their spheres of influence to help them align with the same themes so we can make a lot of great things happen for the association. And that happens when the boards and the managers are getting the same encouragement and recommendations from the other involved industry professionals. And that's the leverage that we're trying to accomplish today. And the result of that is a win-win. The industry professionals find and use the gems of information in a reserve study. I'm stumbling over myself here. I'm getting excited. The industry professionals can help the associations, their clients, reach that improved future. And that is not just good for the association, it's also good for that professional because it serves the best interests of the clients. And those successful clients are great referrals. They're thriving, good things are happening. And so that's great for all the industry professionals, legal, tax, finance, insurance. Knowing how to use a reserve study is good for all the professionals in those fields. Now, here's the outline that I'm going to go through in today's webinar. I'll show you kind of how we're going to order our content today. And it starts out with the question of what is this thing we call a reserve study? How is it used? What's in it for there to find? And it's important because we see too many association treasurers up in front of the group like this cartoon saying, well, this is the part of the budget we'd like to call money we wish we had, shortfalls. And so if we can align the industry professionals to give the same kind of encouragement, we're going to see more and more associations having success. So what is this thing we call a reserve study? How is it different than other things we've heard about? An engineering study, transition study, a forensic analysis? Well, let me walk you through those things. And I'm going to start out with my most familiar, my home base, and that's the reserve study itself. It's a budget and disclosure document. It's something that has a shelf life. The budget is for the upcoming year. The disclosures are for the first day of the fiscal year. Those are the things that the board and the homeowners need to know about what's happening at their association. So a reserve study is an annual document. It's annual budgeting. You budget everything else annually. Reserve study is an annual document that helps the association know where am I and where am I going. And that's different from an architectural or engineering evaluation because that's the kind of thing where you need an evaluation or an inspection or an answer to the question, what's going on? And that happens often with older buildings, trying to figure out why are we getting bad fumes back in? Why are we getting moisture penetration? Why is now the solar panel working so inefficiently? It's something that you do periodically as the need dictates. And then a forensic evaluation is something that often happens aligned with a construction defect project, where you're looking for a potential problem. You're looking for a specific thing. And that's only done, again, as needed, often in a specific case, like I said, for a construction defect situation. And then there are these things called transition studies. We have a couple of our reserve study competitors who do transition studies, but they are a different type of animal. They look for, basically, they help the association through the process of the ownership handoff from control of the developer to control of the board. So who now holds the keys? And that transition study is done once at time of transition. It looks for construction completeness, things like, are all the gutters attached? Are the downspouts attached to the gutters? Is the furnace working in the rec room? Have all the applicable construction codes been complied with? Things like that. That's a transition study, very different from a budget and disclosure document. So you're starting to see now that these have 4 different purposes, and they're done at different times for different reasons. So let me tell you a little more clarification what a reserve study is not. It's not just a bunch of guesses about things far into the future. As I said, a reserve study has a shelf life, or it's a perishable commodity. It's a set of 1-year recommendations. We look forward 20 or 30 years to help make a better recommendation, but the association reserve studies that you receive literally have an expiration date on them. So it's not something about a guess far into the future, because we have the expectation that it will be updated on a regular basis. And it's not just someone's opinion. It's not someone just walking down the road, or an engineer, or someone who does roof consulting. Being a reserve study professional is a specific profession. You can get credentials for it. And it's all what we do, how we do it is guided by National Reserve Study standards. And it's been that way since 1998. And I'd like to reinforce the idea that it's not just a waste of money. People think of that sometimes because, oh, it's just a bunch of guesses and I can guess as good as them. And it's just their opinion. And I worked in this field for 37 years, or I have this background, or I did this when I was in the Navy. It's not a waste of time and money. It is the key to an association's future. Here in my desk, I have an antique key, and it reminds me that keys unlock secrets. They unlock the ability to get to what you want. So in a reserve study, I'll reveal today, or take you through the process of helping you understand that it gives our clients the ability to predict, anticipate, and avoid bad things like special assessments. So that's a little bit of what you're getting with a reserve study, and kind of how it fits into what's going on at an association.
That was a really great overview of what a reserve study is, Robert. Another common question we get is, who does the reserve study? Can you go ahead and cover that for us?
Sure. I talked a little bit about different kind of reports and evaluations, and some of those questions come down to, is it an engineer that we're looking for? What is it that we're looking for? An engineer, they look maybe in their phone book or their Google search or CAI directory or whatever. What am I looking for? Engineer, architect, accountant, contractor, management, consultant. And let me just remind you that what we're trying to accomplish here is a budget and disclosure document. So it's not classically any of those standard professions. It's not primarily the skill of an accountant or bookkeeper, because preparing a reserve study requires property evaluation and cost estimating skills. We're not, someone who's in the field of looking backwards at the numbers at an association is generally not in the business of creating numbers, cost estimates, not in the skill set of creating financial plans, and not in the skill set of walking around on a roof and knowing what they're looking at. And it's not typically the skill set of a manager. And maybe the first thing about that is that being a manager is a full-time job. And generally preparing a reserve study takes a number of hours, and that's just kind of extra time that the manager doesn't have. It does require a specific skill set to gather the information, assemble it, write a particular report, and maybe the biggest flaw is the manager has no independence, because it is almost a critical analysis or a critical review of what is going on at the association, and it can reflect poorly on how the association is being managed or run. Now, obviously, the board is primary on that, but it's difficult for a manager to write a report that's critical about what's happening at an association. With respect to a contractor, they may be great at creating buildings and fixing things, but again, a reserve study requires analytical and report writing skills. And those are skills that typically are not found in someone who's out in the field working with tools all day. And another problem is independence. We had a competitor who for many years was doing reserve studies on the side. Their primary business was painting. And you can imagine that when we would do an update on their reserve studies, when they changed over to our firm, we would see a lot of the painting estimates being a little on the pricey side and a little bit on the short remaining useful life side, because it was so easy for them to say, yeah, you should be painting. And you can see a lack of independence there can be something that would cause a difference in the reserve study. And it's not a home inspector, although it's similar in many ways. The main difference with what's going on with the home inspection is that in a reserve study, we have to go backwards. We have to look into the closet of information, into the history of what happened when and why. And typically a home inspector is done when they walk away from the property. They have the report, they have a printer in their car, and they're not in the business of creating financial analysis, doing research phone calls, research emails, finding out why the building 7 roof is different from the roof on all the other buildings, those kinds of things. So a little different skill set from a home inspector. And it's also different than a classic engineering or architecture report. Those reports, now I'm a state licensed PE professional engineer, nothing wrong with being an engineer, but classically an engineer is looking to solve a particular problem with the building. And so in a reserve study, we're being generalists. So we're not looking for that kind of deep depth of expertise in, let's say, building envelope analysis or elevator efficiency or the boiler and the HVAC system. Those are specialties that are a whole different animal in themselves. What we're talking about in a reserve study is a budget and disclosure document. It's a generalist type of skill set. When we think about hiring people for association reserves, we're looking for 3 things. Someone who can make accurate observations, someone who can make decisions based on those observations, and someone who can communicate in the language of words and numbers. If you look at what's required in the reserve specialist credential, it requires a 4-year Bachelor of Science degree, requires 3 years of experience because you just don't learn this coming out of college, and it requires that you apply National Reserve Study standards, so specific words, specific calculations. And so being a reserve specialist, being an analyst for associations preparing reserve studies is a lot more like being a small business consultant, a not-for-profit consultant, than it is in just being an engineer.
Okay, so now we know what it is and who does it. Now, can you give us an overview of the basic concepts? Like, what are the gems in a reserve study that industry professionals should be looking for?
Right. Thank you, Paige. I like to think of it that way. I like to think of it as reserve study being many page document, maybe 30 pages, maybe 100 pages, but there are gems in there. And unless you know what to look for and where to find them, you're going to miss the gems. And that's kind of the point of what we're doing here today, is reveal that there are a bunch of great pieces of information, because the decisions that the board makes when they're influenced by the manager and they're receiving guidance from the various industry professionals, often those are very obvious. And when you have the professionals that are not giving consistent advice or effective advice, you get into this place that looks like Aspen Creek. What the heck is going on there? We're disorganized, sloppy, and mismanaged. So let's look for the gems. For those of you who've been to our webinars before, some of this will look familiar. There's basically 3 parts to a reserve study. There's the component list that tells you what to reserve for and when those projects are going to happen. There's the evaluation of reserve fund strength, and that's measured in percent funded. Basically, that tells you, well, you can look at your balance sheet and see that you have $150,000 in reserves, but still the question is that good or bad? Do we feel, have we been doing well to have $150,000 right now? Should we have more or less? And so that's what's revealed in this reserve fund strength calculation. And then there's the funding plan. Most people, I think I can stereotype and say most people are familiar that this information is in a reserve study. They're looking for what is the recommendation going to be for what we need to contribute. Let me show you examples of all these. The reserve component list is pretty simple. It's a table of information, description of the projects. UL is useful life and remaining useful life, so how often those projects happen, when's the next time they're going to happen, the current cost, and it's from that current cost that we're going to inflate the future cost for future years. There's often a column in there or additional information on quantity, a 5 horsepower pump or a 2 million BTU boiler or 50,000 square feet of asphalt, things like that. So there's this information that you can start to see is going to be helpful to a lot of the different industry professionals that are serving and supporting the association. The evaluation of reserve fund strength is that question, do we have enough? And that's important because you can see special assessments coming years in advance. Okay, if I'm going to the airport, I live in Los Angeles, and I know I need to leave for the airport 3 hours before my flight. That's just what it takes from where I live. If there's a traffic jam in the first 5 minutes, I'm sighing because this has happened before. In the first 5 minutes leaving my home, I know everything else is going to be tight. It's still 2 hours and 45 minutes away from departure, but I'm already anxious because I know my likelihood of trouble is significantly increased. You can see problems coming in the future, and that's what a reserve study does. When your percent funded is 0 to 30%, you can see there's a significant chance of not having enough money to do what you need to do. And the opposite is true. When you're at or above 70%, there's almost no chance of a special assessment. You have the money that you need. There's very rare chances of special assessments in that case. And that's just the way it is. You can see the future coming. And this is a multi-year funding plan. You hopefully are getting one that is smooth and uniform. And the recommendation is for this initial year, and it's the cash to offset that ongoing deterioration. There's deterioration going on every day, and every day, 365 days of the year into the future, you need to be offsetting that deterioration or you're getting behind. And often that amount, that cost for your association is going to be in the range of 25%. So we get some clients that give us some pushback saying that's crazy for our association. It can't be that much. And I look at it, and the first thing I look at, that's 23% of your total budget. That you're pretty much normal. And they say, you got to be kidding me. I said, no, that's only different and it feels unusual because you've been inadequately making reserve contributions for so many years. You got used to that wrong low number. And of course, that's also why you've had 3 special assessments in the last 10 years. So understand that that's what the contributions are. They're going to range depending on your asset mix, but all this information is in the reserve study. You're going to see all 3 of these in the executive summary of the report. Typically, reserve providers have a nice executive summary. There's this other gem that I think is underappreciated. It's the 30-year summary page where it shows the reserve balance through the years, the expenses through the years. You can see, you can't see, but you can see with the size of print when the large expense years are, when the small expense years are, things like that, and kind of guide the association into the future. And then most reserve study providers nowadays have photographic inventories, and that's included with the full reserve studies and an update with a site visit reserve study. It's a great way to see not only what's there. Well, you saw the component list, but you can see what it looks like, the condition. You can see the quantity. It's a great way to make that, what the heck is what's our boiler look like? Where is it? And that information is generally in the photographic inventory.
All right, Robert, this might be the question we get most often. When do you do a reserve study and why?
Great. I was real pleased to be able to find this little cartoon. It's that businessman finding that his ship has sailed. And remember I said that a reserve study is a budget and disclosure document. So that's an implication of timing. And so for every association, this is a document that works in concert with your fiscal year end. So your fiscal year end is significant, getting it ready in time for the things that need to be done. Now, in this picture, let's pretend this vertical line is the fiscal year end. Reserve studies are done in advance of the fiscal year end, before the fiscal year end. It's a budget recommendation for the next year, and it provides some end-of-year disclosures that typically go out in the end-of-year mailing packet to all the homeowner members. And that's very different from the accounting functions that happen after the fiscal year end. And those accounting functions look backwards, where they audit the prior year, or they are preparing taxes based on the numbers from the prior year. And the year-end reporting, the annual meetings, we hear so much about annual meeting season in winter and spring. We hear about budget season in summer and fall. And there are different things going on, but let me then take you to the next page, why those are seasons. Now, I pulled data from about 10,000 of our most recent reserve studies, looking for a fiscal year end, and no surprise, this is the information that comes out. Most associations have a fiscal year end of December. It's kind of natural, and actually I wonder why developers do anything other than a December 31st fiscal year end. But it is what it is. Second most popular is June 30th, but there's all these different year ends that happen, and this defines the cycle through which an association runs. So we're here in November. The majority of associations are wrapping up their budgets, getting ready for 2021, getting ready for their January 1, 2021 disclosures, all that kind of stuff. And meanwhile, all the associations with the June 30th fiscal year end, they're in the middle of their fiscal year. They have yet to even start this process. So that's a little bit about what is going on and when reserve studies are done. They're done in advance of the fiscal year end.
Okay, how can reserve studies be used by different industry professionals?
Great, and this is one thing we wanted to emphasize specifically in this webinar today. And like this cartoon, it shows a real estate agent showing a townhome association to a prospective buyer couple, and you just see the choice of words this industry professional is saying. As you can see, they aren't wasting their HOA dues on funding reserves. Obviously, this couple is not interested in a nice looking place. They are looking for a cheap place, and therefore the real estate agent is talking about wasting money on reserves. And it's all those little indications that come out from the industry professional. And what we're trying to do here is align people with the same voice. And that means getting on the same team, being unified in themes. And I think you're going to find that I've ordered these alphabetically, but let's start out with attorneys. What's a reserve study? How does a reserve study help an attorney? Well, typically reserve adequacy, adequate reserve contributions are required by governing documents. And I think it was in 2018 or 2019, we have a national definition now for reserve adequacy. And I'll put that in the outline after today's program. And that's something that attorneys should be concerned about for their clients, that they're following the governing documents. And speaking of governing documents, those need to be revised. Attorneys get nervous that they're old, they're outdated, they are not consistent with perhaps state law. And just to let you know, we can put in a line item in your reserve study for governing document revision. It's something that helps the association stay current, just as you would want to stay current with a roof that is watertight. Now, one thing is that we need to be careful that attorneys, although their strength is in knowing or interpreting what common area is and isn't, there's a 4-part test for what makes a reserve component. And being a common area asset is only one of the 4-part tests. So we need attorneys to not start or to not be so vocal about talking about what should or shouldn't be components, because they can say what is and isn't common area, and that's great. That's in their area of strength. And a duty of inquiry, knowing that their clients are gonna get themselves, they don't want to stick their necks out too much. Clients shouldn't be guessing about things. And there's something called a duty of inquiry when you don't know, when you're not an expert. And that's why board members reach out to reserve study professionals to find out their budget and disclosure information. And then, of course, there's state disclosure requirements. You'll find that out. It's a little bit different in every state, but and then there's so many states that don't have disclosure requirements, but where they are, we want to make sure that the association isn't hearing just the state requirement from their attorney and developing the opinion that, well, now that we've updated our reserve study, we can go on to other things because it's done. We've checked that box off, and we can go about talking about getting our garbage removal day from Tuesday to Wednesday, things like that. It's a useful document. State compliance is only one of many purposes. Then we get to master policy. You might remember that picture that I showed earlier of the photographic inventory. It confirms the scope of the common areas. We had one insurance agent give me a call and said, "Thanks, Robert. It was great to see that property there. We weren't aware they had exterior stairwells. That's an additional liability concern." And I saw them in the reserve study, saw that you were reserving for them, and that reminded me that we need to get that added in for the next time. So making sure that things aren't missed, tot lots, all the different things that, how many do we have actually? That's all in the reserve study. And there's that interesting intersection between the reserve expenses and the insured losses, the reserve, you might call them perils, where you might have an association planning to, they're setting money aside to replace their roof, and it's going to be tight on cash, and they're just barely avoiding having a special assessment if they maybe defer a couple other projects, and then they get hit by a hailstorm, it destroys the roof, and their friendly insurance company buys them a brand new roof. And here they are, they moments ago were sweating out getting $150,000 together for their roof, and now they have a brand new roof. And all of a sudden their reserve fund goes from being weak to being strong. So there's that interesting intersection between the two. And note the very different number the numbers that you see in a reserve study, the cost numbers, are specific repair and replacement numbers. They're not reconstruction numbers. If the association gets burned down, the reconstruction number is very different from a summation of all the individual reserve projects. That we're talking about apples and oranges there. D&O. D&O insurance is insurance that defends the board in the normal course of business, and that's kind of the key there, in the normal course of business. If the board members are off recklessly making decisions and not following state law or the governing documents, they're going to have some significant exposure there. So the question is, has the board demonstrated their duty of inquiry? Are they asking the right questions? Are they following the funding requirements in their state? Are they following the funding requirements in their governing documents? So when you're thinking about insurance, don't be reckless. The insurance is for accidents and events outside of your control. It's not a free license to be willfully negligent or reckless. And then we get tax planners, people who are the professionals who are looking back on the year. They look at the reserve income. Where's it coming from? Is it coming from interest? Is it coming from contributions? There's different tax implications. And then the reserve balance. Is that growing normally? Wait, what happened to that $50,000? You forgot to tell me about that one more CD. So it's a double check against reserve balance, the continuity from year to year, and component balances and contributions. There's so many people that look for that table, and that table is only necessary for associations filling out the tax form 1120. For the majority of associations in the country that fill out 1120H, all that component balance and contribution information is largely insignificant. Investment planning. It's important for those in the investment planning field. You may not have a reserve fund investment professional on your association's team if your reserve fund is under $250,000. That's the FDIC insured limit. Once you start getting over that, then you start getting into some complications. And for associations with a reserve balance over $500,000, take my strong recommendation to get a professional on your team. They're going to help you maximize your interest, make sure everything is safe. A lot of good things start to happen. And then when are the expected projects? To maximize your interest earnings, you want to set money aside, but don't set money aside. Don't lock it up in a 4-year or a 5-year T-bill or CD if your reserve plan is that you're going to need to spend it for your elevator renovation next year. So that guides your laddering, investment laddering, when you have money socked away and when you have it liquid or readily available. And then loans to associations. When you're looking for a loan, the lender is going to look for some insights on what are the other upcoming expenses. Maybe you say you need the loan for the asphalt project, and they're going to ask, well, how are you doing with respect to the clubhouse or the roof or all these other things? They want to make sure that the association has the cash flow to repay the loan and take care of all the other things at the association, not run themselves into the ground. And what we're finding is that most lenders to associations are going to require a reserve study update. That's just important information to look at. So what are we recommending? We are going to recommend industry professionals ask for a copy. For all the board members and managers here, have an extra copy ready, ready to email or send to the other people on the team. And then it's up to them to review it and hopefully gather the main points from it and be able to congratulate, encourage, or maybe counsel or scold the board. Basically help you, the manager, encourage the board to do the right thing. Get that team working to the association's advantage and keep the board on track, not going out on a limb or going sideways on something. And along with recommendations, there's a few recommendations to don't industry professionals make component recommendations. Leave that to the reserve specialist. Don't say reserve contributions are for the future. Reserve contributions offset ongoing deterioration. They're not for some rainy day by and by. They're for the deterioration that happens every day. And don't allow them to go years without updating. You wouldn't expect any bank to give you a loan if you gave them only a tax return from 3 years or 5 years ago. They're not able to make wise financial decisions with old information. Encourage the association to update their reserve studies, whether they update it professionally or with software themselves. You got to update that information because it is perishable. And why? Because it takes a team to sell the plan. You see this cartoon here, again by Go Gladly. I love the stuff they have on their site, the gogladly.com website. And this one here saying it's pretty amazing what the HOA is able to do with this place. You'd never believe we're in our 8th year with dues of only $35 a month. And obviously the association can't see. This guy's wondering what the heck is wrong with his glasses. We want to get a team encouraging the association to make wise decisions. Some of those wise decisions are in the board and the owner's best interest. A little bit more reserve contributions is going to do great things for home prices. We found that out in a study we did back in 2018. 12% boost in home prices in condo associations that had a strong reserve fund. So sell that plan because it has a lot of good things. No special assessments, minimized expenses because when you're ready with the money to do projects, you don't get into deferred maintenance. It maximizes those property values and it keeps the board on track and minimizes their liability exposure. And it allows us to be the guide, gets other people on the team. And when we have all the industry professionals singing the same tune, or at least on the same page of that song, as we're looking for the future, let's sow that route with flowers. Let's encourage the board to do the right thing, and let's make it a good process along the way. And hopefully, as we are one on the same theme with guiding these association clients of ours towards an improved future, hopefully with all our spheres of influence, we're reinforcing the wise decisions, the good decisions, and the responsible behavior that's going to lead to all those good things going on at an association. And that leads us to the end of today's program. And again, I believe this is the first one we've ever done primarily designed for the issues involved with industry professionals. And I hope that you'll understand a little bit better how all these other industry professionals can use the reserve study for the association's best interests. So at this point in time, let me turn the microphone over to Paige, who will coordinate our Q&A time. Paige.